Have you ever wondered what happens when the line between the living and the dead becomes too thin? What happens when a place destined for eternal rest transforms into something far more sinister? What if I told you there are calls that should never have been answered, incidents that should have been filed away as a mistake or a hoax? My name doesn't matter anymore. What matters is that I need to tell what happened those 2 nights at the Santa Helena Municipal Cemetery. 2 nights that completely changed my perception of reality, of death, and of what might await us on the other side. But before I begin, I need to ask you a question. Do you believe that the dead can call 911? The night was particularly cold for October. I remember because I was in the middle of my shift, sipping lukewarm coffee from a thermos in the patrol car, when the radio crackled. The dispatcher's voice sounded tired, almost resigned, as if she already knew this call wasn't going to lead to anything. Trespassing at the Santa Helena Municipal Cemetery. Possible vandalism in progress. An anonymous tipster reported suspicious lights and movement near Grave 127, in the north section of the cemetery. My partner at the time, Rodriguez, just sighed and started the patrol car. The Santa Helena Cemetery was known in the region, not for the usual reasons cemeteries are known, but for the stories. Stories of night watchmen who quit after a single night of work. Stories of people who swore they saw figures among the graves. Stories of sounds that shouldn't exist in a place of eternal silence. But I was skeptical. After 15 years in the police force, I'd seen it all. Vandals, drug addicts, teenagers performing silly rituals found on the internet. There was always a rational explanation. Always. We arrived at the main gate at 2:37 in the morning. I remember the exact time because I glanced at the patrol car clock before getting out, wondering how much time was left until the end of my shift. The gate was closed, locked with a padlock that appeared intact. No sign of a break-in. Rodriguez suggested we leave, which was clearly a prank. But something was bothering me. The dispatcher had mentioned an anonymous tipster who would call to report suspicious activity in a cemetery at 2 in the morning. And how would that person have seen anything if the cemetery was locked? We decided to climb over the side wall, where the structure was lower. The concrete was cold under my hands, damp with night dew. On the other side, the cemetery stretched out in a vast expanse of marble and shadows. The moon was nearly full, casting a pale, sickly light on the headstones. The northern sector was at the back of the site, where the oldest tombs were located. We followed the main dirt path, our flashlights cutting through the darkness. The silence was oppressive. There were no sounds of crickets, nocturnal birds, or wind, only our footsteps and our breathing. It was Rodriguez who saw it first. A dim, flickering light coming from the direction we needed to go. It wasn't flashlight or cell phone light. It was softer, more organic, as if something were glowing on its own. We quickened our pace, hands on holsters, hearts racing. That light shouldn't have been there. As we approached, I could make out its source. It was coming from inside an ancient mausoleum, a weathered marble structure with a wrought iron door. Light seeped through the cracks in the door, pulsing gently, like breathing. And then I saw the number engraved in the marble above the door, 127. He crafted a supernatural narrative with increasing tension and sensory details. I'm creating an atmospheric and engaging narrative. I need to continue building tension while maintaining mystery and avoiding direct dialogue. I'll focus on sensory details and a growing sense of terror. The mausoleum door was ajar, not broken down, not forced, simply open, as if someone had just passed by. Pulsing light came from within, and with it, a sound. Low, almost imperceptible, a murmur, or perhaps a prayer. I pushed the door open carefully, my gun drawn. The mausoleum's interior was small, perhaps 10 feet square. A stone sarcophagus stood in the center, and the walls were decorated with time-worn reliefs. But that wasn't what held my attention. The light came from the floor, around the sarcophagus. No, it came from beneath the floor, filtering through invisible cracks in the marble, as if something incandescent lay buried just below. And the murmur, I could hear it clearly now. It was voices, multiple voices, all whispering in unison, words I couldn't quite make out. Rodriguez was behind me, and I could feel his rapid breathing on the back of my neck. He could hear it too. He could see it too. I took another step inside, and that's when the cold hit me. It wasn't the chill of an October night. It was the kind of cold that freezes your bones, paralyzes your muscles, a cold that came from within, that sucked the vital heat from your body. My breath came out in dense clouds of steam, and I could see ice crystals forming on the mausoleum walls. The light began to pulse faster. The voices grew louder, and then the sarcophagus shook. It was a subtle movement at first, just a vibration, as if something were moving inside. But then it grew more violent. The stone lid, which must have weighed hundreds of pounds, began to slide, not being pushed, not being lifted, just sliding, as if on ice. Every instinct in my body screamed for me to run. 15 years of training, procedures, rationality, it all evaporated in that moment. Because what was happening in front of me shouldn't be possible. It couldn't be real. The lid fell to the floor with a deafening crash. The light exploded with blinding intensity, and from within the sarcophagus, something began to rise. I didn't see clearly. My eyes couldn't focus, as if my mind refused to process the image. But I felt it. I sensed the presence of something that shouldn't have been there, something that had been called, something that had responded. Rodriguez screamed, or maybe it was me. We left the mausoleum, tripping over tombstones, tearing our clothes on thorny bushes. Without looking back, the light followed us. I could feel it on my back, hot and cold at the same time. Following every step, we reached the wall we jumped over. We climbed it with a speed I didn't know we were capable of. On the other side, we fell to the asphalt, panting, sweaty despite the cold, and when I finally looked back at the cemetery, everything was dark, completely dark, as if nothing had happened. But something had happened, and the proof was in our hands. They were covered in a dark, viscous substance. It wasn't blood. It wasn't dirt. It was something different, something that disappeared when the first light of dawn touched our skin, evaporating like smoke. We filed our report. Break-in. No suspects found. Possible false alarm. Rodriguez requested a transfer the following week. I tried to rationalize. I tried to convince myself there was a logical explanation, and I almost did it. Almost. Until the second call. 3 weeks passed. 3 weeks of sleepless nights, of nightmares where I was back in that mausoleum, of waking up sweaty and shaking. 3 weeks trying to convince myself it had just been exhaustion, the darkness, my imagination, and then the radio crackled again. It was a Thursday, 2:43 in the morning, almost the same time as the first call. The dispatcher was different, but the message was disturbingly similar. Disturbance reported at the Santa Helena Municipal Cemetery. Screams coming from the north sector. Multiple informants this time. My new partner, Jenkins here, was younger, more enthusiastic. He hadn't known about my first visit to the cemetery. No one knew, except Rodriguez, who was now working in a town 200 miles away. I considered making an excuse, saying I was feeling sick, but a part of me, the part that was still a cop, knew I had to go. I had to find out. The gate was open this time. Wide open, the chains broken and scattered on the ground. Jenkins commented on the vandalism as we entered, his hand resting casually on his holster. He didn't feel what I felt. The weight in the air, the feeling of being watched, the absolute certainty that we shouldn't be there. We didn't have to look far. The screams had stopped, but now there was something else. A trail, not of footprints or destruction, a trail of light. The same pale, pulsing light I'd seen before, only dimmer, like glowing breadcrumbs leading through the graves. Jenkins thought it was someone playing a prank, maybe teenagers with glow-in-the-dark paint. I said nothing. I just followed the trail, my breathing growing shallower with each step. The trail inevitably led us to the northern sector, to Mausoleum 127. But this time it was different. There were people, 3 of them, standing in front of the mausoleum, completely still. Even from a distance, there was something wrong with the way they stood. Too rigid, too still. Jenkins shouted a police badge, ordering them to turn around. No one moved. We approached, guns drawn, all the police car lights trained on them. It was when we got close enough that I saw their faces. They were dead. Not just dead, they were ancient, Their skin stretched taut over their bones, dry and yellowed. Their eyes were sunken in their sockets, but still open, still fixed on the mausoleum door. Their clothes were decades old, decayed and stained, but they were standing. They were waiting. Jenkins vomited. I heard him fall to his knees beside me, but I couldn't look away because I recognized one of the faces. It had been on the news 2 weeks ago. A missing man, James Morrison, 53 years old, last seen 3 weeks ago, exactly 3 weeks ago, on the night of my first visit to the cemetery. The mausoleum door was open again, and the light was there, brighter than before. The voices were back, but now I could make out words. They weren't Portuguese. They weren't words in any language I knew. But somehow, I understood their meaning. They were calling, inviting, promising. The 3 bodies began to move, slowly, stiffly, like puppets pulled by invisible strings. They began walking toward the mausoleum door, and I realized, with growing horror, that one of them was looking at me. James Morrison, his dead eyes fixed on mine, his mouth opening in an impossible smile. He reached out his hand toward me, a skeletal hand, and I heard flesh falling from his fingers. Clear as a bell in the darkness, a voice, his voice, or what was left of it. "You have been called." It wasn't the words that made me run. It was what I saw behind him, through the open door of the mausoleum, descending stairs that shouldn't be there, coming from a place far beyond the bottom of the floor. Figures, dozens of them, hundreds, all rising, all coming, all looking for those who were called. I grabbed Jenkins and ran. This time, I didn't look back. I didn't stop until we were outside the cemetery in the patrol car, doors locked and engine running. My hand was shaking so badly I could barely hold the radio to call for backup. When the other officers arrived 15 minutes later, they found nothing, no bodies, no lights. Mausoleum 127 was sealed, its iron door closed and apparently unopened for decades. There was no evidence that anyone had been there, except for one thing. One thing investigators found that was quickly dismissed as irrelevant. On the ground in front of Mausoleum 127, there were footprints in the damp earth, many footprints, all going in the same direction, all leading into the mausoleum, none coming out. 2 months later, I was on medical leave, chronic insomnia. The doctors said, post-traumatic stress disorder. They didn't know the truth. They couldn't know, but I needed to know. I needed to understand what had happened, what was happening. I spent days in public libraries and city archives, searching for any information about the Santa Helena Municipal Cemetery, about Grave 127. What I found chilled me to the core. Mausoleum 127 was built in 1897 to house the remains of a wealthy local family, the Blackwoods. But this was no ordinary family. The Blackwoods were known for their interest in the occult and esoteric practices. The patriarch, Cornelius Blackwood, claimed to have discovered a method of communicating with the afterlife. He disappeared in 1899, along with his entire family, 17 people. They were never found, but the mausoleum was sealed by court order after reports of disturbances coming from the site. In 1923, the mausoleum was opened during cemetery renovations. Workers found the sarcophagus empty, completely empty. There were no bodies, no bones, nothing. Only symbols engraved on the interior walls, symbols that none of the experts consulted could identify. And then I discovered the part that made it all make sense in a horrible, impossible way. There was a journal, a diary, found in a secret compartment of the mausoleum. Cornelius Blackwood's diary. The last pages described a ritual to open the way between the living and the dead, to allow the dead to return, to allow the living to cross over. But the ritual exacted a price. It needed to be activated. It needed to be called. And once called, once initiated, it could not be stopped. Those who answered the call, those who entered the tomb after the ritual was activated, would become bridges, conduits, living gateways to the other side. And then I understood. The 911 call. It wasn't made by an anonymous tipster. It wasn't made by someone who saw something suspicious. It was made from the mausoleum itself. It was the call, the ritual activating, searching for those who would respond, for those who would come, for me. Rodriguez was right to flee, to transfer, because he hadn't fully entered. He hadn't crossed the threshold. I had entered the mausoleum. I had been there when the light shone, when the voices called. I had been marked. James Morrison, the missing man I saw the second night, had also responded to a call. I checked the records. 3 weeks before my first visit, there was a disturbance call at the cemetery. Morrison was the security guard who responded. He never returned from his shift. And now he was there, in the mausoleum, waiting like all the others who had answered the call over the years, waiting to serve as a bridge. I should have realized sooner. The substance on my hands that first night, it wasn't dirt. It wasn't a coincidence that it disappeared in the sunlight. It was a mark, a seal, a connection being made. I began to notice changes in myself, small things at first. I'd wake up in places I didn't remember going. I'd find dirt under my nails, graveyard dirt. I'd see figures in the corner of my eye, always in the same direction, north, always pointing north, towards St. Helena. The 911 calls continued, every week, sometimes more. Disturbances in the cemetery, lights, sounds, always near grave 127. Other officers responded. Some reported strange experiences, some requested transfers, and some disappeared. 3 officers in the last 2 months disappeared without a trace. The last was Jenkins, my partner that second night. He returned to the cemetery alone a week after our experience. He said he needed to prove to himself it hadn't been real. They found his patrol car outside the gate. The engine was still running. The door was open. The radio was transmitting static, but Jenkins was never found. I know where he is. I know where they all are. Waiting, serving, keeping the bridge open, and I know it's only a matter of time before I join them, because the call never stops. Each night it grows stronger. The voice is clearer. The urge to return, to go to the mausoleum, to descend those stairs I saw, to discover what lies on the other side, is becoming irresistible. This morning, I woke up at my apartment door. My keys were in the lock. My car was running in the garage, and on my phone's GPS, a route was plotted. A route I don't remember creating. A route to the Santa Helena Municipal Cemetery. But there's something I haven't told you yet. Something I only realized 2 hours ago, when I finally connected all the dots. Remember, I said the ritual needed to be activated, that someone needed to initiate the process. I was wrong. He didn't need to be initiated. He never stopped. Cornelius Blackwood and his family didn't disappear in 1899. They completed the ritual. They paved the way. And since then, every person who enters that mausoleum, every soul who answers the call, adds power to the ritual, strengthens the bridge. But there's more. There's always more. I was reviewing 911 call records from the past few decades. Calls reporting disturbances at the cemetery, calls about lights and sounds, and I discovered a pattern. A pattern no one else had noticed because no one was looking. Calls increased, not linearly, exponentially. 1 a year in the 1950s and 60s, 2 a year in the 70s, 5 a year in the 80s, 10 a year in the 90s, 20 a year in the 2000s. This year there have already been 117 calls, 117 calls, 117 opportunities for more people to be marked, for more bridges to be built. And then I found the real revelation, the one that changed everything. In Cornelius Blackwood's diary, on the last page, there was a sentence, a single sentence that scholars had interpreted as delirium. When 1,000 bridges are built, the way will be wide open, and there will no longer be a distinction between this world and the next. 1,000 bridges, 1,000 marked people, waiting in the mausoleum. I checked. I've spent the last 2 hours counting every missing person in St. Helena for the past 125 years. Every unsolved case, every mysterious disappearance near the cemetery. 998. 2 people left. 2 bridges. And then the ritual will be complete. And I am one of them. But here's the part that made me sit down and record this confession. The part that made my blood run cold. You who are listening to me now. You who followed this story to the end. You who are curious about what happened, about what will happen. You just got the call. I didn't choose to record this. I didn't decide to share this story. I woke up 3 hours ago, and this file was on my computer, partially recorded, and my hands were typing words I don't remember thinking. Ritual spreads, not just through people visiting the mausoleum, through stories, through words, through knowledge, by hearing about Tomb 127, by knowing about the ritual, by understanding the calling. You became part of it, and I know, with a certainty that goes beyond reason, that you're feeling it right now. A subtle chill on the back of your neck, an inexplicable desire to know more, to go to Santa Helena, to see the cemetery with your own eyes, to check if this is all real. Don't go. Please, be smarter than I was. Be stronger than Rodriguez. Be more cautious than Jenkins. Because if you cross that gate, if you follow the light to Mausoleum 127, you will be the 1,000th bridge. And then, nothing will be able to stop what is to come. I'm going now. I have no choice. The call is too strong. I can feel the voices singing in my head, promising answers, promising understanding, promising peace. But before I go, I need to tell you one last thing. The scariest thing of all. When I woke up this morning and saw the route plotted on my phone, there was a note, a message I didn't write. It said, "Bring the next one." And underneath, there was a name that shouldn't have been there, a name that made my heart stop. That was his name. How did they know? How is it possible? Unless the ritual is already complete. Unless, by hearing this story, by reaching this point, you've already crossed the threshold without realizing it. Unless I'm already one of 1,000 bridges, and you're the other. I'm going to the cemetery now. I'm going to walk to grave 127. I'm going to go down those stairs that go deeper than they should, and I'm going to find out what waits on the other side. And if you are listening to this, if this message has reached you, so we'll see you soon, very soon, because the call has already been made, and eventually, we all answer. We all go home. Change of tone, more commercial but still maintaining atmosphere. If you've made it this far, if this story gave you chills, if you're afraid to sleep tonight, then you need to check out the complete collection of Supernatural 911 reports. It's available now. The link is pinned in the comments below. But be warned, this material is not for the faint of heart. These are not fictional stories. They are documented accounts, actual transcripts, evidence that has been suppressed. And for those brave enough, there's a bonus chapter. The still active cases, calls that keep happening, places that keep generating occurrences, rituals that seemingly never ended. The link is in the pinned comments. But before you click, ask yourself, do you really want to know the truth? Are you prepared to discover that the world you know is just a thin layer over something much deeper, much darker? Because once you know, once you read these stories, you won't be able to unknow. And maybe, just maybe, one of them will choose you. Just as the story of Tomb 127 chose you today. Click the link, if you dare. And if you're brave enough, come back and tell us in the comments, which case scared you the most? Which story made you look over your shoulder? What call would you never want to receive? We'll be waiting, always waiting, in Tomb 127, and in many other places. If you're listening to this, it's already too late. The file has been opened, the story has been told, the call has been made. Sleep well tonight, it will be achieved.